I don't know what happened. I was supposed to just put the game down and walk away. The game was supposed to end on a question. A question about what happens when you try and build a relationship upon mistrust and lies. It was supposed to have an ending that remind us that sometimes there truly are no endings in life, and sometimes all you're left with is crushing uncertainty. And they need that uncertainty to mean something. I don't know. Maybe I was starting to buy into all that morally ambiguous storytelling business. But then they did it. They made it. They made a sequel. And that sequel answered all of our questions.
Jesus Christ, Joel. What do you do?
I played it. And I thought it was... What the hell? Oh, damn it. Did I forget to turn this off? All right. Hello?
Hi, Mr. Corgi. This is Gene Marlowe, head of Naughty Dog Public Relations. It recently came to our attention that you were going to attempt to review The Last of Us Part 2.
Okay. That actually raises several questions.
Now, would I be correct in assuming that you are aware of the restrictions being placed on critics when discussing this game?
I'm sorry, the what now?
Yes, I'm afraid that if you are to review this game, then you are prohibited from mentioning anything about the character of Abby.
Hold up! I can't mention Abby in the review? Abby makes up literally half this game. Like, if you don't want me to reveal spoilers, then that's one thing. Okay, fine, I totally understand that, but not mentioning something that takes up half the game makes this a nearly impossible game to review.
Well, if you want to mention it, just be warned, we will then reserve the right to demonetize your video.
Okay, so no mention of Abby. Got it. Cool, thanks. Bye. Alright. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So I played it. And I thought it was... God, who is it now? Hello?
Sup, dude? It's me.
Who?
Don't act like you don't know me. I'm the living embodiment of angry fanboy internet rage.
That just raises more questions.
Word is you're reviewing The Last of Us Part 2 and you're gonna crap all over it.
Totally not my intention.
Right on, brother.
Please don't call me brother.
Me and all the hardcore gamer bros are on your side.
I really do not want your support.
This game is garbage. It's nothing but a bunch of forced morals and lessons and crap.
Literally nothing wrong with any of that.
And since when is LA gay? I don't remember.
I'm just going to hang that up and block that number because there was literally nothing to be gained by continuing that conversation. Okay, now that I've got the corporate goons off my back, and I've pissed off all the Mountain Dew swigging true gamer fanboys out there, is there anyone else who wants to add their 2 cents before I actually start reviewing this thing? What?
Hi there, is this Aaron? This is Troy Baker.
Wait, Troy Baker? Like, one of the most talented voice actors in the world? Troy Baker, like, the guy who has provided the voice for dozens of the most memorable video game characters of all time? Troy Baker?
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to say. You know, it's always good to meet a fan.
Oh my goodness. Hi, Mr. Baker. Big fan. This is crazy. What are you up to? I was just in the middle of reviewing The Last of Us Part 2 and, oh man, you're in this game, aren't you? Yeah. Oh, what can I do for you today?
Aaron, have you ever heard of Teddy Roosevelt?
Yeah.
And have you ever heard his speech, The Man in the Arena?
I gotta be honest with you, Mr. Baker. This is not where I expected this conversation to go.
It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again.
This conversation is too long. Sounds like he's going to be going for a little while, so tell you what, let's just skip this opening skit and here's our review of The Last of Us Part 2. Yeah, I was saying that reviewing The Last of Us Part 2 is a bit difficult is the understatement of this very long year. Oh my god, how is it only July? Not only are there people angry at this game, some for legitimate reasons, some absolutely not for legitimate reasons, and not only are there people who love this game who are convinced that if you have problems with it, then it's for all the wrong reasons, and not only has Naughty Dog been reaching out and doing some rather shady stuff with critics who don't absolutely love this game, and not only have angry, rage-fueled gamer bros started sending death threats to people who worked on the game because they can't separate fiction from reality, and not only is half this game being blocked from being discussed, but also, this is a sequel to one of the most critically acclaimed video games of all time, and I thought that game was just okay. Yeah, I know that's not nearly as serious of an issue as everything else I just listed off, but I do need to bring it up before this review begins because, well, I figure you should all know where I'm coming from on this. For months leading up to this game's release, people kept asking me, are you excited for The Last of Us Part 2? And my response was always, I guess? To tell you the truth, I thought the first Last of Us was a good game. Not great, but good. In all honesty, I found it to be a fairly basic story, one that resembled many other zombie post-apocalyptic tales, just they were playing it way more straight and being far more serious. And hey, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that everything on Earth needs to be brand new. No, not at all. You can totally feed me the same thing I've eaten many times before as long as it's well prepared. I can eat a grilled cheese sandwich for the 99th time as long as it's a good grilled cheese sandwich. And I thought The Last of Us Part 1 was a pretty good grilled cheese sandwich. Not great, but pretty good. However, the one thing about that game that I loved, absolutely loved, was the ending. Spoilers for The Last of Us Part 1, but if you're watching a review of Part 2, yeah, you kinda need to be all caught up. Set in a world where a fungal infection takes over human brains and turns them into bizarre plant zombies, a man named Joel, who lost his daughter when the infection began, is tasked with escorting a young girl who is the same age his daughter would have been across the country to get her to a group called the Fireflies because she's immune to the infection, and the Fireflies have the one doctor in the world who knows how to use Ellie to make a cure. However, along the way, Joel's heart starts to thaw and he begins to bond with Ellie, and when he drops her off, he learns the only way they can make a cure from her is to kill her. Joel can't let this happen and goes on a murder rampage, killing all the Fireflies. He tells Ellie that there was no way for them to make a cure, and after some time, Ellie finally confronts Joel and says that after everything that she's been through, all the suffering and pain that she has seen and felt, she thought it could all have been for something if they could create a cure. Joel tells her that he promises there was no cure, and Ellie just says,
okay.
And that's it. And that is an amazing ending. This entire game, as I said, is a really basic story about a man who lost his daughter, now forming a new parental bond with someone, and it's all set in a rather basic environment of a zombie apocalypse. But the thing that made it unique, other than the fungal twist on the zombies, is that it played it so straight, and it really leaned into that whole realistic tone, especially with how dark and depressing it was willing to get. This was a game that constantly turned to you and said, "Oh, you thought that was going to work out? Well, too bad." And this ending was perfect for that. Oh, you think everything is okay because Joel learned to care and Ellie now has someone to raise her? You think they can move on from all that? Nope. Ellie can totally tell something is up and that Joel is lying. And that happy ever after that Joel thought he might get with Ellie is a long, long way off. So what will that doubt lead to? Who knows?
Sometimes you don't get an answer, because sometimes the questions are what really matters, and that was perfect for this game. And now we have a sequel, and it gave us all those answers. The Last of Us Part 2 is now set years after the first game, and society, well, it certainly isn't back to normal, but you can tell it's started to grow again. Towns are sprouting up, people are organized, there actually is some sense of normal life for people living in these towns. But then a mysterious new group called the Wolves come to town and they do something. And it forces Ellie to now set off on her own quest for revenge. Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and address that right now. Even though Naughty Dog is being rather strict on spoilers, there are indeed some things in here that should not be spoiled. For the love of God, do not read the comments down below. I can guarantee you now, literally the first one will be the spoiler I just mentioned. From there, Ellie goes on a cross-country rampage until she finds the people who came to her town and attacked. The whole game goes on to become a story about the weight of revenge, about what it can do to a person, and about how there are consequences to your actions. It attempts to take the standard formula that all action games follow, go through an area, clear out all the bad guys, move on to the next area, and then it tries to tell you, no, that's not how life works. These aren't faceless enemies. They're people. People with connections, lives, and a history, and you're ending all that. This is a rather heavy subject, and you could craft a great narrative around that. So do they?
Hey, how about we talk about that gameplay, everybody?
Now, Last of Us Part 2 is a stealth-heavy game that heavily involves creeping around a variety of locations, having to take on either humans or infected mushroom zombies. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think the stealth was all that great in the first game. I felt like if you stepped on a twig, then zombies would be on you within seconds. It was way too punishing. Now, I'll admit that could just have been me, because if I haven't made it clear in past reviews, then I'll go ahead and let you in on a little secret about me. Aaron doesn't stealth. I am terrible at stealth games. I am as discreet as a tuba being thrown down a staircase. So even though I didn't like the stealth in the first game, I will gladly admit it could just have been me. However, in The Last of Us Part 2, the stealth mechanics feel much better. In this game, I felt like they gave you far more freedom, and if an enemy started to sniff you out, then it was much easier to hide and recover. Now, I will admit there are a few instances where it still feels practically impossible to sneak around everyone, but I still found myself successfully stealth killing way more enemies than in the first game. But you can't stealth your way past everyone. No matter how good you are at this game, it is impossible to sneak past everyone, and you will have to fight off some enemies. And when it comes to the combat, I thought the dodging mechanic was a little bit clunky. It didn't really feel as fluid as I hoped that it would. It always felt like the animation was starting a little too late and it wasn't moving as much as I had hoped. But about halfway through the game, I finally got used to the timing and the animation of it, and after that, I actually began to enjoy the combat in this game. I thought that actually worked pretty well. Although I will admit I did still die a fair number of times in this game, either from the combat or from an enemy noticing me while I was trying to be sneaky, because as I said, I am bad at stealth games. But speaking as someone who is bad at stealth games, can I just say, oh my goodness, it was appreciated how the load times in here were not that long at all, and every time I died, it would just instantly return me back to pretty much right where I left off. That was like the main reason why the combat never got frustrating in this game. No matter how bad I was or how much I screwed up, the game was actually very forgiving. And the combat is improved even further by your partners in the game. Ellie will be joined by multiple temporary partners, and they are definitely a godsend in combat. It felt so good to see my partners doing stealth kills on their own, knowing that would be one less enemy that I would have to deal with. And speaking of your partners in this game, that kind of brings me to the rest of the characters, and I have to bring this up. The voice cast is amazing in here. There are so many moments in here where a character would just have to spill their emotional guts on the floor, and I would actually be speechless sometimes. I could not believe how good some of the performances in here were. Although, I will say, when it comes to these performances, and this is not their fault at all, this lies more with the writing and the directing, I do think that this game relies a little bit too heavily on those awkward indie movie pauses. You know, when someone just makes a really long pause in between what they say to try and make it seem like they're thinking about everything that has ever happened to them in that moment. Yeah, there's a lot of that in this game, and sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it feels like they're just kind of showing off how deep and serious they can be.
What do you think of this view, huh? It's pretty nice. Yeah, this route has its perks.
She's yours.
No. No. I don't know the first thing about
I
this.
promised that I'd teach you how to play.
You did.
So what do you say, tomorrow night? First lesson?
Deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Screw it.
But even beyond the combat and beyond the stealth, to me, the thing that saw the most improvement from the first game was the crafting. In the last game, you would find objects to craft together into bombs or ammo or other tools, but the items you needed to collect to craft together were so rare. The Last of Us Part 1 was truly a modern example of a survival horror game because I was constantly counting my inventory and was sweating whenever I had to use anything because I knew it would take me forever to craft another weapon. But in here, there's far more supplies to be found. Heck, I constantly found myself with too many supplies and I had no idea what to use them all on. But because you have so many more supplies now, and you can craft so many more items, they can make the combat more intense. There would be some fights in here in which the only way that I could survive would be to unload everything I had crammed into my pockets. But even though I found myself constantly getting close to running out of supplies, I never did. I just always got close enough to give myself that rush of energy that would get my adrenaline up, that fear that, oh my goodness, what if I do run out of items, and then I could continue the game. That energy would stick with me. It was a great way to keep me on my toes. And they didn't do that thing that most games do, where they give you a ton of supplies just to prep you for a battle. No, the way the supplies are laid out is pretty natural. It never feels like a game developer saying, yeah, give them some collectibles here so that way they can get ready for the next fight. No, sometimes there will be a long stretch of no combat and you can just collect supplies however you want. You can build whatever you want at your leisure. But then there are other times where the enemies are just raining down on you and you have to find supplies and craft on the fly while avoiding them. But the crafting and the stealth and everything else pales in comparison to the best thing in the game, the environment. This is hands down the most gorgeous and fully fleshed out post-apocalyptic landscape I've ever seen. It felt like every single building and shop was sculpted with so much attention. It's like they actually thought of the story behind these locations. For example, there are these little superhero cards that you can find for Ellie to collect. They don't do anything, they're just really charming. It's a fun thing to occupy your time with. And they're not just scattered all over the place. They're actually in places where you would expect to find superhero cards, like an abandoned kid's bedroom, a toy store, or hanging off someone's bicycle wheel. I know it's small, but it makes them feel less like a video game collectible that the developers just scattered around, and more like the remains of an abandoned world. And you'll find notes all around the place, left by people who used to live in these locations, either when the outbreak was happening or from other travelers making their way through this area. And this is nothing new. Most adventure newer horror games have bits of world building like this, but these may very well be the best notes I've ever seen in a game like this. They actually felt real, and many of them would build off one another, and when I started to connect them in my head, they painted a full story that felt like it could have been its own video game. There was one series of notes left by a member of the enemy group, and I got so invested in his story that I actually found myself thinking, oh god, if he's one of the enemies, then did I already meet him? Did I kill him? That's how real they're able to make this world feel. You want to know how much world building they did? There was a moment I was exploring a room and I found a drawer already open and empty, and I just kind of stopped and marveled at because it made me realize, oh, I didn't open that. That means someone else has already been here and has been searching for supplies. And I actually started to wonder if that person was still here. It's just an open drawer. It should not be getting that kind of a response from me. But they did such a good job of making this world feel real that I couldn't help it. And that expands to pretty much every other corner in this game. There are so many details in here, it's shocking. Like anytime you upgrade your guns, the process of watching our character dismantle and attach new compartments to customize it is so detailed, it almost left me feeling uneasy. Like I was awkwardly standing over someone's shoulder watching them work. It's really impressive how many details went into here and how much work the developers put into this game. I want to applaud them for it. Until I remembered that this game was haunted by soul-crushing crunch periods and Naughty Dog worked this staff to the breaking point, and now I'm not really impressed anymore. I'm more of just depressed because, yeah, this is nice, but it wasn't worth working someone to the bone. I'm pretty sure you could have had someone not spend a couple dozen hours working on this, and my score still would have been pretty much the same. But the crushing reality behind Naughty Dog's work ethics aside, yes, this world is stunning, and exploring it was my favorite part of the game. In fact, in all honesty, I kinda wish this was the entire game. I really wish this whole thing was just exploring an overrun empty Seattle looking for clues to track down the people you're after. And I know what you might be saying. Wait, if you just made this whole game going around and exploring and finding collectibles and clues, then you wouldn't have any combat. You wouldn't want that, would you?
Oh, get rid of all the combat in the game. What a crazy idea. Oh. Yes.
Yeah, okay, I said that I eventually got used to the controls of the combat, but that doesn't mean I ever liked it. And that wasn't because I didn't like the actual mechanics of the combat. No, it's because in this game, you either fight humans or zombies, and both of them drove me insane for different reasons. The zombies, and yes, I know they're not called zombies, but they're zombies. The zombies behave like most stealth game enemies, following similar patterns over and over, and then when they're alerted, they actually do a great job of programming them to run at you like a mindless savage mob, which is perfect for inducing panic into the player and forcing them to think on their feet. And there's a decent variety of new zombies, such as the Stalkers, that are zombies that know how to hide and don't make any sounds, so you can't even use your Daredevil level hearing to detect them. Man, going up against these creatures was genuinely chilling. I was walking with my back to a wall the entire time, just constantly looking back and forth because I had no idea where they would come from next. And as a big horror game fan, these segments were amazing. So there's a lot of good to these zombies. But oh, dear God, I could not stand the sound design behind them. The random screams, the clicks and the creaks, and worst of all, when they all notice you and suddenly you just have a room full of howler monkeys raining down on you. I get the point of it. They want something that sounds inhuman to fill you with fear. It clearly draws inspiration from the Invasion of the Body Snatcher scream, and that worked great in that film. But here, it is so irritating and it drove me nuts.
Hey, want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
But as bad as they were, I would still gladly take the zombies over the human enemies any day, because at least with the zombies, when you kill them, they're gone. That's it. But the humans just keep coming. Again, this is a stealth game, so you need to slowly creep around everyone, meaning that clearing out a room can eat up a sweet chunk of your time. Or you can do what I did, which is clear out about 2/3 of the room, and then the final group all knows you and start raining hellfire down on you at once, but that's just me, you do you. But you're going to take all this time clearing out all the enemies, only for you to take out the final one, and then all of a sudden, a new batch of enemies pop up. And then you clear them out, and then even more enemies pop up. And again, you have super Daredevil radar senses. You can see the enemies. You can count how many of them there are. Even if they're calling for backup, where the hell are they coming from? It feels absurd at times. It feels like the enemies are rolling up on you in a clown car and they just keep coming.
Jesus. That it? Oh, these people are fucking nuts. Fuck, more of them. Where are they coming from? Quiet. I think that's it. Oh, damn this city.
Again, the combat in here is fine. It even feels pretty good at times, and having to slowly sneak around so many enemies wouldn't be so bad. Except that then more enemies will show up, and then more, and even more after that. There came a point where I was so exhausted with the combat and the sneaking that if I walked into a room and I saw it was filled with waist-high cover, I just groaned and said, oh, crap. It's just so... What's the word I'm looking for?
It's time consuming.
No matter what positives I have to say about the combat and the stealth and the strategic terrain and the weapon variety and the crafting, none of it really matters when I'm going up against the human enemies because those encounters always go on and on and on. They feel like they take forever and eventually I just don't care anymore about them. The encounters with the human enemies always overstay their welcome. And speaking of overstaying your welcome, that's as good a segue as I'm ever going to get to finally start talking about the story.
Now, normally I would address how good or bad the story is at the start of the video by wanting to save it for after the mechanics because A, it is really hard to talk about or show anything of this game without revealing something that could be considered a spoiler, and I am still going to try my hardest to avoid anything big. I promise you, I will not go into any specifics. But you will see some stuff coming up that Naughty Dog really wanted to keep hidden, such as Abby. So if you want to go into this game 100% clean, then now would be a good time to tune out. In fact, I'll probably go from least spoilery thing to most spoilery thing that I can talk about. So even if you think that you're cool, just be warned, I will be slowly ramping this up. And B, the story is easily the most important element of The Last of Us. It lets you know right from the start, this is a game that is meant to focus on the characters and their development and how they grow and change. These games are meant to be not just narrative heavy, but narrative dependent. If you go into this game thinking, yeah, I don't really care about the story, then you should just turn around right now. There is nothing here for you. And even then, what's really important isn't even the surface level of the story. It's all the stuff underneath. It's the way it's presented. As I said, one of the reasons I wasn't blown away by the first game was because I thought the plot was pretty standard. I'd seen it before. And that is even more true here, because in The Last of Us Part 2, the zombies are barely even an issue. No, in this story, the true enemy is man. Oh, wow. So unique. That sure hasn't been the theme of 95% of all zombie movies. Well, at least they avoid the tired old trope of having a crazed post-apocalyptic cult, and god damn it. That wasn't a joke just for the script, by the way. When I was playing this game, I literally thought to myself, well, at least there isn't a crazed post-apocalyptic cult. And as I was forming that thought in my head, I literally discovered at that moment, and yes, I am using literally correctly here in this sense, I literally at that moment discovered a giant mural for the cult leader, and my jaw just dropped because I was legit speechless at that moment. Just, wow. Wow, Naughty Dog. Was there a bingo card you were trying to fill out on this one? But even if this is all pretty standard stuff, what's important is how it's told. As I said, this game is about the characters and their journey, and even if it's a journey that we've seen in other movies and games before, you can still present that with a level of detail, a level of seriousness, a tone, and a depth that you don't get in most other games. And, well, it sure is serious. There sure is a very dark tone here, and, yeah. Okay, there is no good way to get into this, so let's just dive in. This is a story of revenge. Ellie is heading out to seek vengeance against the members of this new group called the Wolves, who came to her town and attacked them. And Ellie's quest runs counter to Joel's quest from the first game, because Joel started off in a very dark place, but over his time with Ellie, he learned to care again. I mean, he still went on a murder rampage at the end of the game, but at least his motivations were different. He did change. Ellie, on the other hand, starts off more mature and stable than Joel, but the entire game is about her descending into darkness. It is about her having to do horrible things that break her down. And beyond that, it becomes a story about how her doing these horrible things just go on to hurt others. And then they hurt others, and it all becomes one big cycle. Now, this is a great idea. I mean, having our new protagonist go on the opposite journey of our last protagonist makes this game an amazing foil to the first. It is kind of standard for the second installment of a franchise to be the dark middle chapter, and, well, this sure is a much darker story. But here's where this falls apart. Ellie ends up having to do a lot in her quest that takes her down this dark path. She becomes consumed by anger and rage and ends up doing things to people that leaves her emotionally scarred. She will murder people, she will torture people, and you can see she is visibly shaken by it. There is a mark on her soul that will never be erased by the things that she has to do. And it's a very bold choice on the developers to show the impact that these actions will have on a person. Or at least it would be if Ellie didn't murder 200 random thugs on her way to the cinematic kill that actually matters. And that's when this big serious story starts to fall apart. Remember when I said I kind of wish they took all the enemies out of the game and it was just about you exploring and finding clues leading up to Ellie finally finding the people responsible for what happened to her? Yeah, that's not just because I didn't like the combat, that's because it actually would make the story better. You will see Ellie murder someone in a cutscene, and then we will see how that weighs on her. And that would be great if I didn't stop and immediately say, excuse me, you killed 50 other people just today alone. Why did you not care about any of them? It seriously feels like the people working on the story and the people designing the gameplay never actually talk to each other. They never stopped to think about how the actual game part of their video game was going to go directly against the story. And I know you might say, oh, well, hey, it's a video game. You know how this works. You know that the random jobbers don't count. The random thugs you run through are just faceless goons that are there for you to encounter something. You're not supposed to take them seriously. Yeah, normally in a game, I could suspend my disbelief for that, no problem. But not here. Because in this game, they wanted to hammer home the idea that this is real. They really wanted to make the violence in this game feel like Ellie was actually cutting her way through real people. You won't just shoot someone and then they ragdoll to the ground. No, they'll start screaming and twitching around in gut-wrenching pain. They'll have other characters run up and say, "No, they got Jerry, not Jerry," which, yes, I'll admit, just got a big eye roll for me because, again, we've seen dozens of other video games do this and try to make the bad guys seem real, but to me, it always felt like I was just watching a writer's room sit around and discuss what names they hadn't already used for the bad guys. But still, even if it didn't really work on me, it was still this game trying to turn to you and say, no, this is real. These were actual people with family and friends, and you just murdered them, you monster. Heck, they tried so hard to lean into the realism that when Ellie sneaks up behind someone and stabs them in the throat, the lead designer for the game actually said that they studied videos of people actually being stabbed so they could make it feel as real as possible. Oh, quick side note, video game companies, stop doing that! Stop making your developers watch actual footage of murder so they can make it look more real in your games. Crunching them is bad enough, but the moment you throw forcing them to watch snuff films into the mix, it sounds like some form of psychological torture.
Hey, congratulations, champ. You always wanted to be a game developer? Well, now you finally got your wish. You get to work on this big, massive AAA release, the next installment in this groundbreaking, critically acclaimed series. Now get in that tiny room, stay there for 12 hours a day, you're not allowed to leave and go home and see your family, and you have to spend the entire time watching video clips of people being murdered. Oh, also there's donuts in the break room. Alright, that's it for me, champ.
So when you have Ellie cutting through dozens upon dozens of people, all of whom you've gone out of your way to make seem as real as humanly possible, why would she suddenly be affected by the handful of story-related deaths? And if she was affected by the story-related deaths, shouldn't that have an impact on how she goes about playing the rest of the game? I mean, let's say she mindlessly killed 100 people and didn't give it a second thought. But then she kills that one person that actually does make her think, and it does affect her. Why then does she wake up the next morning and then go right back to killing 100 other people without an ounce of hesitation? Why does the story keep telling us this will have an impact on her when the gameplay never actually shows it? And I know this is a stealth game, so some people out there are going to say, oh, well, you're supposed to use your stealth to sneak past all these people. Yeah, you can't. Not only is it next to impossible to sneak through most areas without killing anyone, there are many moments where you have to confront people. Even in moments where it really looks like there should be a way around that. Best example of what I'm talking about is there came a moment where I found a secret location where someone had obviously been living. I found several notes around the area that made it very clear the people living here used to belong to the villain group, the Wolves. But they quit because they realized the Wolves had gone too far and they were now on the run from them. While I was in there, I got jumped by one of these characters and Ellie turned around and held the attacker with a weapon to their head while all of his friends surrounded me. I thought to myself, okay, I know for a fact these people aren't the bad guys. I read the notes that said that they left that group. We're practically on the same side here, and I've got them all here unable to attack me. Clearly, there is a way to get out of this situation. Ellie just has to explain what's up and we're all good. Okay, she isn't explaining what's up. Maybe if I hit this button, then it'll hit the person who I'm holding hostage and it'll keep him from squirming, and then I can explain, oh no, that just killed him and now we're fine. Okay, let's restart this entire thing. Let's just restart this. There has to be some way around this. I mean, maybe I just didn't give them enough time to respond. Let's just wait. Let's just wait, and eventually everyone will calm down and no, we're doing this all over again. That doesn't seem to work either. I tried so many times to figure out a way to get out of this situation without killing these people, but no, you have to kill them. Even though Ellie has already read enough notes from them to know they are not your enemy. And to make matters worse, after she kills them, she then goes into the room where they were all hiding to find one last note that essentially says the same stuff that the other note said, and Ellie just goes,
Ugh. I thought I was a wolf. Be more careful.
What? Okay, this one isn't even just taking out random jobbers. This was a scripted sequence. A scripted sequence where Ellie comes to realize that she just murdered the wrong people, and her response was, whoops, my bad, everyone. If she isn't affected at all by that, why am I supposed to buy that she suddenly becomes affected later on by the other scripted deaths? This story about Ellie descending into darkness is great on paper, but the execution feels like it never went beyond just on paper. And there's other non-scripted moments of the actual gameplay that seem to just rub this in your face. Every now and again, if you do just the right amount of damage to an enemy, then they'll get down on their knees and beg you for their life. I saw this happen and I thought, oh, okay, I get it. The game is giving Ellie a chance to not be a monster, to let them live, to literally end the cycle of violence right now. So I walked away, and then they immediately tried to kill me again, and the only way to make them stop was to kill them first. Again, I have no problem playing a game where you blast and chop your way through waves of enemies. I can rip and tear until it is done, no problem. Heck, Ellie killed a good chunk of guys in the first game. But that game was about do what you have to do to survive. The world is a harsh, unforgiving place that will force you to do these things. And that fit. That absolutely matched what that game was about. This game, as Naughty Dog told us numerous times, is about ending the cycle of violence. And it doesn't fit.
Yes, player, it is I, the moral of the story. You must end the cycle of violence.
Oh, okay. See ya.
Wait, no, not like that. We didn't say end the cycle of violence now. Get your ass back here. Get over here right now, and you keep being violent.
And I know someone will say, well, Ellie can't just stop. The story isn't over. This game is narrative driven. You have to have her character progress according to the story. True. But then you should probably think about that progression of her story when you imagine stuff like this in your gameplay. I understand how Ellie murdering someone in cold blood as they beg for their life shows just how far gone she is. But again, there are scripted murders later on that don't feel this cold, and yet they appear to affect Ellie while she just brushes these murders right off her shoulder. She doesn't care about them at all. Imagine if in the beginning of this game, Ellie was taking out these villains with no problem, not giving it a second thought, but then you got that scripted sequence that did actually make her think about this, and then after that point, you would see the villains start begging for their life, and then Ellie would have the option to let them live, showing that what Ellie had done earlier on in that scripted sequence did actually have an impact on her. It did actually weigh on her. It was something that was affecting her. Or go the opposite route on that and have it be at the beginning of the game, Ellie is cutting through these villains without thinking about, and then you see Ellie in one of these scripted kills do something much darker than anything we've seen her do before, and then later on, you see these random enemies start begging for their lives, and you, the player, don't even hit a button. Ellie just immediately takes them out, and it makes you, the player, realize, holy cow, that's how far down Ellie has gone. There is a recipe here to make the story that they wanted to tell, and they've got the ingredients to make it. But I feel like the way that they put those ingredients in kind of feels contradictory to the recipe. And that's not the only thing that felt contradictory in this game. This is a much smaller complaint, but it drove me crazy. As I said, this game is constantly trying to make you feel like this is real. This isn't like your normal video games. No, this game is going to feel as realistic as possible, and that's fine. But then whenever we ran into a zombie, they still had the stupid video game monster names. It is so hard for me to feel like this game all fits together when one moment we're witnessing some horrifically realistic scenes of violence and the antagonists are calling out each other's names because you just murdered a real person, Ellie.
God damn it! Oh, Charlotte! Oh no!
But then 5 minutes later, we have a giant gas-farting zombie coming at me, and Ellie is shouting out, "Look out, it's a bloater!" This game really wanted to go for a certain tone, but whenever it decided to turn back into a video game, it fumbled hard. Although, maybe it needed that. because that's the next problem with this story. The tone. Now I know someone is going to say, oh, what, you have a problem with the game being dark? You have a problem with the dark tone? No, I don't have a problem with the dark tone. I have a problem that this game is trying so hard to be dark, and it's constantly trying to have the same one dark tone all throughout it. Let's look at the previous game. Yes, that one was incredibly dark, one of the darkest, most depressing games I've ever played. But it also knew you had to occasionally take a break from that. You had to give your audience a chance to breathe. Ellie provided many moments of humor in the first game. You got a few nice moments with some new characters that you ran into, and the moment with the giraffe was perfect. It was exactly what we needed. And I know someone might say, yeah, but most of the nicer moments led into darker moments later on. Yes, they did, because that's how tones work. You can't just keep hitting someone in the gut with dark tones nonstop. You need to give us the occasional breather so we can rest. That way, you can go right back to punching us in the gut and we'll feel it all over again. This game doesn't have that. This game is just continuously punching you in the stomach while being about 30% longer than the first game. And you can't just hit people with the same one dark tone nonstop for 20 hours straight. People will get numb to it. And that's exactly what happened to me. They hit me with that same one tone for so long, I just eventually rolled my eyes and said, oh my God, I get it. Everything is terrible. There are no moments to let you breathe in here. No moments of peace.
Hold up! Yes, you there, person who is about to type into the comments, but what about this moment? Yes, there are a handful of moments in this game that are peaceful and are even quite beautiful. However, whereas with the last game, all the moments like that would happen in the present, all the moments like that in this game happen in flashbacks, and they all involve characters who have already had terrible things happen to them in the present. So they're not here to be breaks from the tension. They're not here to be that relief valve that you need. No, they're here to remind you of the terrible things that have already happened in this game. They are not here to put you at ease so that way you can go back to feeling depressed all over again. They're just here to try and make you feel more depressed right now. And you can't keep doing that. Even the nice moments that are supposed to be relief moments in this game are just here to continue to hammer in the same one tone over and over again.
A great example of this, and forgive me because while I'm still going to try and keep this vague, we are now going to get into some more spoiler-heavy territory here, so you've been warned. There comes a moment where you are in a flashback, playing as a different character, and you're playing fetch with a dog. And it's a very touching moment, and you can tell how much this character loves this dog. And this dog is actually helping a totally different character open up and feel at ease and feel safe. It's such a good moment, and it's such a good dog. Yeah, this flashback happens after Ellie murdered that dog in the present.
Shit. Stupid dog.
So this whole sequence isn't a break from the tension of the game. It's just there to go, aren't you sad about that dog? Oh, you murdered that dog. Guess what? I bet you didn't know that was a good dog, did you? And it's not just that one dog. Ellie murders multiple dogs in this game, and you get several flashbacks of playing fetch with them or giving them scratches, just so the game can rub it in your face. Oh, you horrible monster, how dare you do that? Game? You made me do it. These were cutscenes. They were unavoidable. You don't have to make me feel bad about killing dogs in games. They're dogs. They're man's best friend. Generations of cohabitation have kind of taught me to like them. But it's not just the dogs either. There are several moments where you see characters that Ellie killed in flashbacks, now from a different perspective, and you see how nice they were, and they want to make you care about them. And honestly, it just took the dark, serious, depressing tone of the game to a point where it almost became parody. Again, I'm not against dark, serious tones, but this game constantly felt like it just had to hammer it home. It just had to go that one extra step. It just had to make that one last push, and it just became ridiculous at points. There were so many times when this game felt like it hit the exact perfect note. And then, like Columbo exiting a room, it just had to turn around and say, I'm sorry, one last thing. No, we don't need one last thing. You nailed it. Now you're kind of ruining it.
Oh no! They killed Johnny! Oh God, no, not Johnny. What you don't understand is that Johnny was also raising his younger brother back home, and without Johnny to take care of him, Johnny's little brother is going to die too. Oh God, not Johnny, and not Johnny's little brother. And what you also don't understand is that Johnny's little brother was feeding a family of cats, and now without Johnny's little brother, that family of cats is going to starve. And what you also don't understand is that one of those cats had the cure for cancer inside of it. Oh God, not Johnny, and Johnny's little brother, and the cancer-curing cat. No! Okay, I will admit I am exaggerating, but not by as much as you might think.
So yes, honestly, I was not caring for the tone of this game. Not because it was dark and depressing and quote-unquote realistic, but because I felt like they had no idea how to balance it. And oftentimes, their need to be so dark really wrecked the progression that Ellie's character was going through. This story about Ellie slowly descending into darkness and being psychologically scarred, it didn't really work when she would go right back to just murdering wave after wave of people and not caring about at all. It almost made her feel like a sociopath, in all honesty. I started to hate Ellie towards the end of this game, which I can only think is how the writers wanted you to feel. So if that's the case, then hey, good job. You did it. But I think all of the themes that they wanted to keep in here and all the lessons that they wanted this game to be about could absolutely still have been told while still taking it down a notch without adding in there that one last thing. And because of that, I honestly really dislike this story.
That is until the twist. Now, you guys will have to forgive me on this one because, as I said, we are going to be slowly increasing the spoilery stuff in here, but I am still going to try and remain vague. I'm going to try and not mention any specific major spoilers in here. However, this is the thing that Naughty Dog did not want the critics to talk about, and I tried to figure out a way to fully discuss this game and to give my full opinion of this game without actually talking about, but you know something? Screw it, it's 50% of the game, and almost every other critic on YouTube is completely ignoring Naughty Dog on this one. So if Naughty Dog decides to just single me out on this one, then so be it, because I have to bring this up. You only play as Ellie for half of this game. Then, for the other half of the game, you play as Abby, who was a member of the Wolves, the villain group that comes to Ellie's town at the beginning of this game and causes all the problems to begin with.
Now, Abby's story shares a lot of similarities with Ellie's. They both have friends going through similar situations, both of them feel anger towards things that have happened to them in the past, but Abby's story goes in the complete opposite direction from Ellie's. Because when Ellie's story starts, she's a perfectly normal person, leading a perfectly normal life. She has friends that she cares about, she takes her work responsibly, but her story sees her slowly descending into madness. It sees her going down this dark path until she becomes a monster. But Abby starts out as a monster. She's already working for the bad guys, and she loves it. She's not there by accident. She's not there because she doesn't understand what they're doing. She's at war with a second villain group, and she tortures them. She hunts them down, and she doesn't even think of them as being humans. She almost enjoys the terrible things that she does to them. That is, until she meets two members of this group. Two children who have split off and are on the run from their former cult. Abby can't get them out of her head, and she goes back to check on them and see if they're okay, and slowly she starts to care about them. She actually tries to help them even when it goes against her own team. In other words, Abby starts off as a villain in a very dark place, but by meeting some kids, she learns the error of her ways and begins to turn herself around. Again, yes, this is a very cliche plot. It's so cliche, it was literally Joel's plot from the first game. But as I said, something can totally be a cliche and still be good if you know how to make it work. And I gotta be honest with you, this is what pulled me back around. I felt so uncomfortable and frustrated with Ellie's story, but this side of the game was genuinely engaging to me, and I found myself really growing attached to these characters. I became concerned for what would happen to them next, whereas with Ellie's story, I was more concerned about what she would do next. With Abby, I wanted to see if she could help these kids, whereas with Ellie, I just sat there thinking about how she was ruining the lives of everyone close to her. And even the levels are completely different with these two. With Ellie, I thought every level was slow and kind of dull. As I said, exploring the world was my favorite part with Ellie because just taking out wave after wave of bad guys was so exhausting and repetitive to me. Meanwhile, Abby has got easily the best set pieces in the entire game. Having to make your way down an abandoned hotel was one of the most stunning levels of any game I played this year. Having to cross from one skyscraper to another over a rickety bridge was so thrilling, I dare you to play it and not feel agoraphobic. And I won't even show anything from the finale of her story, but it absolutely feels like the perfect final level to cap off an adventure this huge. So yes, Abby's half of the game really saved this entire experience for me. But it also kind of saved Ellie's half of the game. As I said, I hated what was happening to Ellie, and I cannot stress this enough. Yes, I do know that her descending into darkness is the point of her story. I know that this is the dark middle chapter that is supposed to show her hitting an absolute low point, but it is so low, and it is so overwhelmingly dark with zero light for so long that I did not care. It made me too numb to the whole thing. But then, when I saw what was happening with Abby, I got it. I got that there was a balance here. This was two stories. One of a good person who went mad and became a villain, and the other about a villain who grew a conscience and tried to redeem herself. Seeing these two stories clash was actually really fascinating to me when I realized what was going on. But I probably would have realized what was going on far sooner if, and just hear me out on this, they didn't save all of Abby's story for the second half of the game. Yes, you play through the entire game as Ellie with no idea that when it's all done, you're now going to flash back 3 days and play everything again as Abby. And this is why Naughty Dog has been so harsh about people revealing that you play as Abby. They really did want it to be a surprise, but this drove me insane because after taking some time to really think about it, this felt like the worst way to approach this idea. The switch between the two characters happens right at the peak of Ellie's story, right at the climax. Then it goes back 3 days, and now you're playing as Abby. And you're with her for about 10 hours. So by the time that you get back to Ellie's story, you have no attachment to Ellie. You just spent 10 hours with this other character, and they want you to think about Ellie again? Yeah, no, I'm sorry, we're playing Abby now. Video game ended with Ellie, now Abby is protagonist. By the time that we got back to Ellie, all the tension from her storyline was gone. It would be like if you played 10 hours of a Mario game, got right up to Bowser, and then all of a sudden you have to play 10 hours of Crash Bandicoot, and then the game says, yeah, so about Mario, what? No, I'm playing Crash now, leave me alone. It is mind-boggling why they didn't cut between the two, especially since both of their stories are even divided into chapters that would have made transitioning between them very natural. Then, not only would you have continuously built up tension between the two of them, leading up to them inevitably meeting, but also, then the actions that Ellie carries out would have had far more impact. Remember that example from earlier about how the flashbacks don't work as relief moments because they're there just to make you feel worse about the things that have already happened in the present? That would have been fixed if you just cut between the two of them. Instead of me watching Ellie murder Abby's dog, then coming in here hours later and saying, guess what? That dog was a good dog. Abby liked that dog. Give me the scene of Abby playing with the dog so I get the nice relief moment, then have Ellie murder it so it can deliver that gut punch. Instead, we watch Ellie be a cold-blooded murder machine for the 12th hour in a row, followed by a scene that means nothing now because I already know what eventually happened to the dog. It's actually kind of crazy how Naughty Dog has been so concerned about people spoiling this game when their own game spoils the emotional moments that are supposed to come later on. The only reason to put all of Abby's gameplay in the second half of the game is so that it can be a twist. So they can say, surprise, you're Abby, and now you're going to get to see all the consequences of what Ellie has done. And that is a terrible twist. That shouldn't be a twist. As I said, long before we swapped over to Abby, I already knew the game was trying to make me feel bad for the horrible things it was making Ellie do. We all saw that that was the lesson this game was trying to teach. But if you cut between the two of them, I could get an attachment to these characters Ellie is killing beyond just a random NPC shouting out, "No, not Sharon! Oh, poor Sharon! She was one day away from retirement!" The impact would have been much larger. The rising tension would have been higher. We would have gotten that emotional release valve that we needed to lead to more effective gut punches later on. But they didn't do any of that because they wanted to shout, "Surprise! New protagonist!" right when you thought the game was about to wrap up, which that's the other thing. It took me about 5 hours before I could actually even start caring about Abby's game, because since they introduced it right at the climax of Ellie's story, I just kept saying to myself, okay, this can't take too long because we have to get back to Ellie. I mean, clearly this will be over with quick. Okay, it's still going, but any moment now. Any moment now. How about now? Okay, it's still going, but we're going to have to eventually cut back to Ellie. I mean, we were right at the pinnacle scene there, and there is literally nothing left of this game. And oh, wait, why is it saying day 2 now? Oh, God. We're here for the entire thing, aren't we? But at least it went out strong. Like I said, I had gotten so numb and distant from Ellie's story that I just wanted it to end. But Abby actually pulled me back in. I was fully invested in her story of redemption and came to really like her character.
One more thing.
Is what I was going to say until this game, again, just had to go that one extra step. They just had to throw in there that one last thing. Abby's story all leads up to a big climactic moment, and in that moment, I remember loving it. I thought this was the perfect way for this game to go out, and I could not believe how well they managed to turn everything around. And then, in that moment, Abby says one line. Actually, you know what? Line is giving it too much credit. It's a word. She says one word, and that one word picked up her character arc, gently carried it over to the window, and threw it away. Okay, maybe not her entire character arc, I'm exaggerating a little bit on that, but about 75% of the progression that she had made over the course of this game is almost completely undone by one word. And I just looked at that, and I was speechless. I just thought to myself, so did she learn anything?
Which, after some thinking, really seems to be the problem with this entire game. I don't think anyone learned the lessons they were supposed to. I mean, yes, Abby learned to care about these kids, and that did give me something to hold on to. But Naughty Dog kept touting that this game would be about the cycle of violence, and having to learn that the cycle of violence only leads to more violence. And that's a great message, and the story is certainly set up to talk about this subject. But in the days since I finished this game, I've been looking back on it and thinking about it, and honestly, I don't think anyone in this game actually learned that. Ellie kills 100 members of the Wolves, including some very close friends of Abby, and she does all of this because of what Abby does at the start of the game, but it never once feels to me like Abby stops to realize, oh, this is happening because of me. My friends are dead because of someone seeking revenge for what I did. I never got the sense that she learned that lesson. And Ellie looks like she is disturbed by the things that she had to do, but that's only in cutscenes. She will then go right back out there and do the exact same things that she just did the very next day. The lesson they're trying to teach is good, but I don't think they actually teach it to any of the characters. I mean, heck, even at the big decisive moment at the end of the game where a character does actually have to make a very difficult decision, I don't actually get the sense that the reason they're making that decision is spurred on by this lesson. We did a spoiler talk for this game right after I beat it, and I went off in that video, but I did say that as time goes on, I'm sure my feelings will die down. I'll forget some of the stuff I didn't like, and I'll find more things that I did like, and I'll come to understand new things that will make me appreciate this game more, because that's what normally happens in games like this. But no! This is one of the only times where, as time has gone on, I've come to find more things that tick me off. However, despite those problems with the story, despite the horrible pacing of the game with its two protagonists, I still think that the highs shone pretty brightly, and the final confrontation, the moment this entire game was leading to, was amazing.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the performance might have been uneven in the first half, but The Last of Us Part 2 managed to pull off a successful dismount, and they stuck the landing. I tell you, you'll love to see a game like this turn things around. So let's turn over to the judges right now and see what they have to... Oh my, ladies and gentlemen, it would appear as if the judges are all in agreement. This game is getting an 8 out of 10. Oh, you'll love to see it, ladies and gentlemen. Even after a rocky start, it just goes to show you the power of a successful finale. So from all of us here at the Summer Games, I want to say thanks for tuning in, stay healthy, and make sure to stay tuned, because coming up next, oh wait, what was that? What? No, that can't be. Oh my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, this almost never happens, but after a successful finale, it would appear as if The Last of Us Part 2 is, am I saying this correctly? The Last of Us Part 2 has decided to get back up onto the bar and is still going. Oh no, I don't know who told them this was a good idea, and it certainly looks like the crowd is now starting to turn on them, and oh, yep, there it is. It would appear as if the judges are now changing their score.
Yeah, we have to talk about this. I do believe that despite my problems with the pacing and that one word throwing Abby's character development away, I still think what this game was going for at the end is genius. I love how this game ended. And then it didn't end. I knew there would be an epilogue, of course there would be, but I pictured a scene, something like the first Last of Us had, which left you with questions and doubts, one of those things don't always wrap up in a neat, tidy package kind of ending. But no, we get about 4 more hours of gameplay. Gameplay that just feels like it keeps going, and one ending scene right after another. This game just constantly had to add that one more last thing. This is second only to Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of epilogues that overstay their welcome. This epilogue goes on for so long, we end up going to a new location and meeting a brand new group of bad guys. They literally introduce a new horde of bad guys in the epilogue. Who does that? And remember how I said they completely wrecked Abby's character development and her redemption arc in just one word? Oh, don't worry, because in this epilogue, Ellie is going to lap her. As I have said over and over, this story is about Ellie going down a dark path to the point where she becomes a borderline villain. But during this epilogue, at the very end of the game, that border is gone. She goes full villain. You never go full villain. And I know that the game is trying to disturb you with this. I know it's trying to be brutal and uncomfortable, and it's trying to take you to the edge of sanity. But as I have stated numerous times in this review, this game constantly feels like it had to do that one last thing. It always wanted to go one step further than it actually should, and because of that, I went right up to that edge, and then they kicked me off into the dark abyss where nothing mattered anymore, and I no longer cared about Ellie. I get wanting to show a character going through a descent. Hell, I even get taking your hero and turning them into a villain. I actually think that's a very fascinating story. And as I said a moment ago, when I realized that's what they were doing with Ellie as they took Abby from a villain to a hero, I was totally on board. I thought that was a bold choice and I really wanted to see where it went. But I have to wonder if the game developers realized that's what they were doing, because at the end of this game, they still want you to feel bad for Ellie. They still want you to sympathize with Ellie and even still kind of be on her side. And no, I couldn't. It was impossible for me to care about her after the things that she had done. And I just have to stress, I hate that I'm saying this, because as I pointed out in that opening skit, there are a lot of people out there who are hating Ellie just because she's gay. And don't tell me that there aren't. There are literally people tanking the Metacritic score just saying, don't put lesbians in your video games. That's literally multiple reviews that I've seen. There are indeed prejudiced people out there who are hating Ellie just for that. So believe me when I say that the last thing I want to do is get on the internet right now and also say I hated Ellie, because I don't want to possibly attract all those assholes and summon them like Beetlejuice. I don't want anyone to see me complain about Ellie and think, oh, you're just in that same group as them. I assure you, I am not. Screw those people. I want nothing to do with them. But yeah, man, Ellie is kind of an unlikable monster and I never want to see her again. Now, if the third game decides to focus on, I don't know, Abby, maybe I'll come back. If they wanted to start a grown-up Lev, cool, I'm on board. That kid was great and they've got a lot of story to tell with him. But if we have to follow Ellie again, well, I'm not saying they can't redeem her. Hell, they were mostly able to redeem Abby aside from that one word, and she was a monster at the start of this game, so it's possible, but it's going to be an uphill climb. So, when it's all said and done, yeah, that epilogue did far more harm than good. In fact, in retrospect, I don't think it did any good. So, what's my final score now?
I give it a 6.
A 6?
Wow. Like a solid 6.
So much for hoping this year wouldn't have another Death Stranding, a critically beloved darling that I just didn't care for at all, but here we are. Here we are. I apologize for how long this video went on. I think this is easily my longest review ever. I actually don't think I will ever top the length of this video, but there was a lot to cover, and as I said, we did an unscripted spoiler talk, and that went on for an hour, and a week after recording it, all I could think was, oh geez, how did I not mention that? So, also I want to apologize that I had to get kinda spoilery in here. I hope that I didn't ruin anything in this game for anyone. I hope that I gave everyone a fair amount of warning to tune out, but in order to address some of my biggest issues with the game, both positive and negative, I had to get a little spoilery. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Although again, for the love of God, if you haven't played this game, don't read the comments. I can guarantee they're just going to be spoilers. And if you want some far more positive reviews about some other video games from us, then those will be popping up right here. And you can also check the description down below for where you can follow us on Twitter and Twitch. In fact, speaking of Twitch, we just got done with a week-long charity stream over there where we raise money for doctors combating COVID-19. So thank you to everyone who showed up for that and supported us. And I really hope that after this review, none of you want your money back. But thanks again, everyone. Come back next time.